Good afternoon, everybody. And welcome again to Chatting with the Rev with me, your host, Reverend G.W. Scott. I'm glad to have you with us here today. This is the last day of the week, work week rather. And you know that this is the second day of December. Oh my goodness, almost here at Christmas, almost, this year is almost over. It's hard to believe that's 2016 with all of the interesting and intriguing, controversial, and much discussed uh, things that have happened in this past year. Good afternoon to my wife, Teresa Jeanette Scott, aka Lady T. Glad to have you with us again. It's just interesting to note just how much has happened in this year. Things that we never thought would happen have happened. And as we anticipate the year 2017, and just in less than a month now, we have to look at things the way they really are. I want to acknowledge my cousin, Kareen Henry. God bless you. And so today we're going to be discussing a topic which is very important to me. People with disabilities, the forgotten majority. People with disabilities, the forgotten majority. You know, the way society treats people with disabilities, you would assume that we are a small little group of people that have really no voice, or we really don't have a voice, but we're a small group that really is of little interest to people. We are small in number, we're insignificant rather in our importance. And sometimes if you would just look at it at face value, it would seem like we're not big enough to really affect any change, or we're not big enough to make things happen in our favor, if you will. For those that don't know, I was born with cerebral palsy, diagnosed when I was 14 months old, which is well over 60-some years now. As a teenager, I had a hip fusion on my good side, my good hip. My cerebral palsy was on my right side, and my fusion was on my left hip because I favored it so much. So when I was 13 going on 14, I had a series of operations to correct that, and eventually it was fused after the fourth operation. I've fallen down the stairs, breaking the hip that was fused. I've had a knee replacement on my cerebral palsy side, and on and on and on. Various other physical challenges that I've had to face. Asthma since I was 12. Sleep apnea. Good afternoon, Mark. So I know very well the realities of disabilities. I know very well the discrimination that is a part of our daily life. Biases and prejudices. So if you didn't know any better, you would think we're just a small little group. We're not visible, certainly, like other groups. We're not vocal like other groups, and I think that's to our own chagrin. But the society as a whole would imagine us to be really an insignificant bunch of folk. But the truth of the matter is, there are 1 billion people with disabilities around the world. 1 billion. And here in the United States, there are 60 million people with disabilities, or as my wife has coined, those who are challenged with challenged abilities. 60 million right here in America, in the United States of America. And 1 billion around the world. If everyone that was disabled would get together and form a nation with that 1 billion folk, we would be the 3rd largest nation in the world. Think about that. We would be the 3rd largest nation in the world. Look at this thing in perspective. We would only be behind China, who has 1.4 billion, And India, which has 1.38 billion. We're almost where they are right now. We're 1 billion. And that's those who are known to have disabilities. They're in the system somehow. They're in the census somehow. Somehow they've been recorded. I don't know how many people are suffering with disabilities that nobody knows about. Maybe the disability is too slight to really be acknowledged. Hello to my cousin Dean. Hopefully we'll see y'all tomorrow. But this is the issue that we're talking about. It would look like, or at face value, that we were an insignificant number. But the truth of the matter is, there are 1 billion in the world, and there are 60 million here in the United States of America. If we would separate ourselves and become a state, the 51st state, for example, here in the United States of America, we would be the largest state by far of any of the other 50 states. California has 38,802,500 people in the state. We have 60 million people with disabilities. In the continent of North America, there are 570 million people. That includes Canada, Mexico, Cuba, Haiti, Dominican Republic, Bermuda, Mexico, naturally our country. 570 million people. There are 1 billion people that are disabled in the world. So we are a significant number. We are a significant number. We cross every racial, every ethnic, every cultural, every religious, socioeconomic class. We're included in all of that. Whether you're a male or a female, it doesn't matter. We're included in all of that. There are people that are male. There are people that are female who have disabilities naturally. Sexual preference doesn't matter. Heterosexual, homosexual, whatever it may be, have physical disabilities or challenged abilities. So by far, we are a forgotten majority. We are by far a forgotten majority. So if we're so vast in numbers, 1 billion, 600 million, 60 million here in America, 1 billion around the world, why is it that we're so impotent, lacking power, strength, influence? We are ignored, mistreated, abused. We're the poorest of the poor. Why is it if we have so many numbers that we're virtually a non-entity in terms of policy and in terms of priority? Why is it? And this is not just here in America, but it's around the world. I'm going to tell you something. There have been children that have been killed in various parts of the world. Disabled people around the world are among the least powerful in the poorest of the poor. In many countries, particularly those that are considered third world countries, the only income a disabled person has is the income that he receives or she receives through begging. And this is 2016. This is not during the Middle Ages or earlier than that. Modern times, present day times. There are countries in this world who maim children. Yes, they maim them. They cut up their hands, their arms, their legs, on purpose, so that they can go out and receive the monies that are out there for this poor, pitiful child. So they can be beggars and bring money into the family. One of the leading countries there in the continent of Africa. There are groups there, religious groups, who kill the children, throwing them into the river, who have physical, developmental, or mental challenges, because they believe that they are imperfect, they're sinful. There was something wrong with this child. It was a mistake. So they want to return the soul back to the spirit world. Right here in 2016, on the eve of 2017, with no real possibility or no real reality of change. In some countries, there are people who are considered learning disabled, quote unquote, who are quickly put into institutions and mental wards instead of being included into the main society, integrated within the larger society. We'd rather put them away, just forget about them. I've said this story before and I'll repeat it again. I was born in 1951, and the early part of 1952, I was diagnosed with having cerebral palsy, and they told my mother and father at the time that throw him in an institution. You're young. You're 22, he's 23, meaning my father and mother. You're young, you can have many more children. Put him away and live your life. That was the mentality of people back in those days. Franklin Roosevelt had polio. And because he thought if everyone knew to the extent of the polio impacted his life, that he would never be elected president, he hid it the best he could. Very seldom are there pictures, I think there's only one or two, that are publicly noticed, that have been put up publicly noticed at the time, and not many even now, of him sitting in the wheelchair. That's how he really traveled, for real, for real. But every time you see him, he's standing, if he is standing at all, he's standing at the podium, and you ever notice there's always two people on either side of him. He wore braces that weighed 200 pounds. His fireside chats, if you ever see any of them on YouTube or other venues, will always show him sitting. He felt if the general public knew to what extent his polio impacted his life, no one would ever vote for him. So he hid it the best he could. And many of the people in society, the people that were citizens of this nation, didn't even know he had polio. They knew he had some kind of ailment that kind of limited him, but to what extent? And there are still countries out there now, and I'm going to be honest with you, there are places even now here in the United States of America that still lean toward ostracizing and isolating and excluding instead of including people with disabilities. And I'm going to be honest with you again. And we'll talk about this in another time, but we're going to talk, at least going to mention it now, that one of the greatest institutions that are guilty of this is the church. Yes, I'm saying it. I was a pastor for many years, and I can say it. Most churches are not even accessible to people with disabilities. And if you do have a ramp or an elevator or a lift of some kind, that's for one type of disability, and all it does is bring you into the church. There's no activity, there's no program. You don't include them within the life of the church. You don't promote them to be lean toward their being officers of the church or even ministers of the church. They're just there. There are some churches that allow them to come in so they can be spectacles. Maybe there'll be a miracle wrought. Hello, Shawnette. Maybe there'll be a miracle wrought. Or you pity him, or I went to a church one time, a few times, one time with my wife, and they sat us way in the back, one church we went to. Another church, I was refused the entrance into the sanctuary because they already had their quota of 4 wheelchairs. Now, this is a church that houses 500 people in the sanctuary. But because I was the 5th wheelchair to come in, I was not allowed to enter into the sanctuary. I was told to come back another time, and if they were me, I would come back a little earlier. Now, keep in mind, I'm a pastor, so I don't walk in the church at 11 o'clock. I was there by 10:30 to quarter to 11. Because I know protocol, I know what you're supposed to do. Shawnette knows. I was her pastor. You're on time. But that was still too late to get my place in the church. When society is overly influenced by secular humanism, which is a modern term for eugenic mentality, people with disability always are going to get the short end of the stick. Even the definition of the term, which we've discussed before, disability, is defined as being limited, disadvantaged, unable to do anything, disqualified to do anything. Just that. So we call somebody disabled, and I've had people on YouTube who are subscribed to their channels, and they argue the point. There's nothing wrong with disability. I want to be called disabled and all of that. And I say to them, some of them, I don't say it to all of them, but I make comment that if you knew the definition of the word, you would at least pause. And it's hard to get away from it because that's what's used so often that it's hard to pull away and begin another concept of what people with disabilities are. I like that challenged ability that my wife coined. But disability means you're limited. You're disadvantaged. You're disqualified to do anything. And if that's a disability, then I don't know what Franklin Roosevelt was doing. I don't know what Fanny Crosby was doing. She was blind and she wrote most of the hymns that we sing. I don't know what Beethoven, when he was writing his sonnets and his symphonies, I don't know what he was doing because he was deaf. Stevie Wonder, Ray Charles, I can go on and on. The Apostle Paul had epilepsy. Moses had a speech impediment. Jacob had a limp. I can go on and on. One of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, Stephen Hopkins, he had cerebral palsy. Toulouse-Lautrec, one of the greatest painters of modern history, was a little person, stood 4 feet 8. So if they were limited, disadvantaged, disqualified to do anything, somebody should have told them, and many more. I began preaching when I was 12 with my cerebral palsy. I know so many people who have physical challenges, developmental challenges. Chris Burke, was an actor who had Down syndrome. He has it still. I say it had because the program that he was, I think it was the Wonder Years, or something like that. I think it was one of those shows back in the 90s. So many people. Marty Matlin won the Academy Award when she was nothing but a young girl. She's deaf. Children of a Lesser God, she won the Academy Award for. Somebody should have told them that you're disqualified from doing anything. How can you win the Academy Award? How can you be a preacher since you were 12 and I'm 65? How can you be the President of the United States like Franklin Roosevelt? Not one term, not 2 terms, not 3 terms, but 4 times he was elected President of the United States of America. Took us out of the Depression. A man sitting in a chair because of his polio. Gave us victory in World War II. Somebody should have told them the story. Should have cued them in on the reality that they're not supposed to be able to do anything. Did you notice how seldom the real life, everyday concerns were brought up in the presidential campaign of this year? Everybody else's concerns were front and center stage. And so they should have been. Black lives do matter. Racial equality does matter. Wage equality does matter between men and women. If I'm working the same kind of job you're working, doing the same work you're doing, I should be paid the same way. We should be concerned about being fair to our immigrants. Reaching out to the refugees that are being slaughtered in the countries that they live in every single day. We should be concerned. There should be issues, taxes, increase, and the like. Educating our children, they should be front and center. But along with those things, should the issues of disabled people be also front and center? We love bringing them out into the stage to be the show, showing people how open-minded we are because we got them on the stage like some little character of some sort. You're just trying to say something. I don't know what you're trying to say. Or how inspirational, I guess they are. We talked about inspirational porn. Condescending, actually. Showing how big-hearted we are. We roll the poor child onto the stage. Put them in the center of the stage. Nobody talked about the issues of disability. One of the candidates, you know him, he's now our president-elect, Donald J. Trump. I looked at his website. It says virtually nothing about disabled people. Talks a little bit about vets. But overall, he said nothing about how he would deal in particular, specifically stating how he would deal with the issues that impact and affect people with disabilities. What we do remember about Donald Trump during the campaign is that 2 times he made fun of people, made mockery of folk, condescending to people who have disabilities. That's what we remember. I haven't heard him say anything about the issues about disability. And when they do say, they'll say, "Oh yes, it's the right thing to do, and yes, we're going to be concerned about those issues," but not like we do when we deal with other issues. The intensity of it, the commitment to it, is not the same. We're marginalized, like a footnote in the story of life, the story of humanity. Like for so many years, African Americans it was like footnotes, Black history separate from American history. have American history without including black history. But for many years, when I was growing up, and I know it's true for Dean, we're all about the same age, there wasn't much discussion about black history, and certainly not even about slavery, other than it existed. All we knew about Booker T. Washington. We knew about George Washington Carver and his peanut. We know about Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad. Mary McLeod Bethune started Tuskegee Institute. We know about some things, but overall, I mean, the many things that we've been involved with. In fact, I didn't know until college about anything in great length about W.E.B. Du Bois. Didn't hear much about Marcus Garvey. These two were heroes of their time. When I was in high school, I mean almost towards the end of high school, Martin Luther King's name came up. Came up more after he was assassinated than it did before he was assassinated, but he would be showing up every once in a while in our history classes and all of that. But for the main, we didn't have any great deal of black history knowledge, not from school. Not during the 50s and 60s when I went to school. My wife says black history was considered to be non-important, and it was. I remember it used to be a day we had Black History Day. We only had one day of Black History. That was Black History Month. I think every month should be discussed something that a black person, an African American person did in that month for this country. You know? My wife notes February is the shortest month in the year. 28, sometimes 29 days, and that's it. Never 30 or 31. It's the shortest month of the year. And it looks like after that month is over, you hear virtually nothing about black history. You hear virtually nothing. And what about disabled history? What did we do as disabled folk throughout history? I just mentioned about Franklin Roosevelt being the longest serving president of any of the 45 presidents, 45 being Donald Trump. No one has served any longer. Good afternoon, Deidre. No one served any longer than Franklin Roosevelt. Not George Washington, not Abraham Lincoln, not some of the great presidents of the past, not Teddy Roosevelt, his fifth cousin. No one served longer in the office of President of the United States than Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And the only reason why he didn't conclude his final term is because he died in office. April of 1945. Some of the greatest achievements, even now, one of the greatest scientists is Stephen Hawking. He's a man who has a form of muscular dystrophy. Can't even speak. He has to speak through a synthesizer, a voice synthesizer. All the hymns we sing, from Blessed Assurance, Pass Me Not, O General Savior, were written by Fanny Crosby. These are the things we need to know. We need to get ourselves out of the ordinary. When we talk about Native American history, we talk about them massacring this person and that person, massacring General Custer and all that kind of thing that we talk about. Why is it massacre when it comes about the Indians or the Native Americans dealing with the invaders that came from Europe? But the invaders are called settlers, pilgrims, explorers. Have a holiday for Columbus, Christopher Columbus, who was the greatest massacrer of all time. cut off Native Americans' hands and feet and all of this. I mean, he was the most evil man that we ever had. Equal to Adolf Hitler, if not worse. But he's lauded as being the founder of America, discoverer of America. And I always wondered, even as a child, I used to think, how can you discover something that someone already else inhabits? And he didn't even come to the United States of America. That's not where he landed. He landed around Hispania, where Haiti and Dominican Republic is right now. He never came to the United States of America, yet we celebrated bigger than anybody else. Never did step foot in the United States of America. The soil that we know as United States of America. Never did. Yet every October, it was October the 12th, now it's the first, that second Monday of every year we celebrate Columbus Day. I'm so glad that some states have disallowed it and no longer observe it as their state holiday. But the nation still does. It's still a national holiday for many. How we lift up some and don't even reach down to help, a lending hand, a helping hand to someone else. Our President-elect Donald Trump has largely been silent. And I wonder what his administration is going to be like. I believe of all the groups out there that are being filled with trepidation, fear, anxiety, and all the rest of that, the one that should be the most fearful are people with disabilities. Why? Because his new nominee, one of the newer nominees to the cabinet post of Health and Human Services, wants to cut Medicaid, Medicare, wants to give Medicaid and other social programs that now are being co-opted by the federal government and all of that. He wants to give them back to the states. And the federal government then gives them one set of monies for that particular state, and that's all they give them. That's going to impact the programs. Right now, the federal government meets whatever the state has to pay. The federal government meets that money with equal amount of money, which allows the states to do more. Now, if you're going to give the states a lump sum, and it's going to be according to the number of people you have in that particular state, and you're going to force the states now to take this program for the most part over, it's going to be a problem. There's people in that cabinet already that have spoken verbally in the past. We don't know what's going to happen in the future, but they've spoken verbally in the past about Social Security. Dismantling that, dismantling Obamacare, or the Affordable Health Act. Dismantling and repealing and revoking and all of that. These actions that, in spite of their little problems here and bureaucratic issues there, they still are doing something to help somebody. Yes, I'm right along with everybody. You got to give Donald Trump his opportunity to be a president, like he says, of all the people. You have to give him a chance to do that because on January the 20th, he will be sworn in as the 45th president. Like it or not, whether you voted for him or not, whether you agree with his policies or not. We've lived under Republican rule before. Ronald Reagan, lest we forget. Both Bushes, lest we forget. Richard Nixon. We've lived under Republican presidents before. Now you say, well, Donald Trump is extreme. But if you look at some of the cabinet members that he's putting into place, including his vice president, they are the establishment. Yes, they are. He says not the establishment, but he has enough sense as a businessman to know that you got to court those people that are right now in power. And the professional politicians are the ones that hold the key to his success or failure. So he has to compromise, and he has to get along with, and he has to appoint a few of them. And peppered in there are still some of those very radical, Tea Party-ish type of nominees as well. But all it means to me is we have to be aware of, or we have to be cognizant of. We have to keep our eyes on the prize. We have to make sure that what he's doing, he's going to be held accountable for. That's our responsibility. When 2018 comes, that midterm election, we need to come out and vote in a big way. That's when the senators and the congresspersons are voted for. That's when the governors are voted for. This year, 2018, all 435 congresspersons will be up for re-election. What are you going to do about it if you don't like this congressperson and don't like that congressperson? Look at who your congressperson is in your state. I tell you how to get it. Are you doing what I'm asking you to do? House rather, www.house.gov, www.house.gov for your congressperson. It will tell you who your congresspersons are and who your particular congressperson is in your particular district, in your particular state. If you go to www.senator.gov, you will find out who your two senators are. If you go and download an app called Smart Voter, you will see who all your elected officials are. From the president to your senators, to your governors, to your mayors, everybody that you have as your local, state, and national official, you can find on your phone. An app called Smart Voter. And you can find everybody who represents you from President of the United States all the way down to the chief of police in your city or your town. And that's easy to do. You're on your phone all the time as it is. You can go in the app for all kind of stuff. Playing solitaire and this and that and that and this, and games you want and this and that. You know, go to Smart Voter. You're on the internet all the time, trying to look at this, trying to look at that, trying to get a little Netflix going, and trying to get a Hulu going, and this and that. Go to www.house.gov. Go to www.senator.gov and find out who they are. You can find out their records, what they voted for over the years. You know, I've talked about this before, about term limits for senators and congresspersons. You have congresspersons right now that have been in there for 51 years. Senators who have been in there 45 to 49 years in the Senate. Why are you there that long? The possibility and the probability of your being corrupted, that the lobbyists have you in under their thumb, becomes greater the longer you stay in. Where do you think you're getting that millions of dollars to run your campaign, to run your TV ads, to campaign all over the country? And that comes from not just the little guys who send in $5, but most of the people get it from the lobbyists, the big industries. Used to be tobacco. Now it's oil. It's steel. Other people do it. The lobbyists. Then you got the big money people. I call them the 5%ers. Let's keep our eyes on the prize. Let's keep our eyes on the White House and the one who sits in the White House. And all of those cabinet members, all those congresspersons, all those senators, all the judges, Supreme Court and all the others, federal judges, district judges, appellate judges, traffic court judges, all of them, There are laws right now, and we're going to deal with it next week. Then we're going to be through right now. We're going to end our program. But next week, we're going to be talking about some other things. We're going to talk about the role of the church. We're going to talk about, next week, I think we're going to talk about who some of his appointees are. Donald Trump. We're going to talk about some of the laws that are still on the books that discriminate against people in this country if someone wants to apply it. It's still a law of the land. What are we doing about it? Do we know what they are? We're going to deal with some of these laws. You're going to be surprised about some of the laws. There still are laws on the books, have not been repealed, have not been changed, have not been amended. They are the same laws that happened back in the 1800s, and they still are on the books today. And all someone has to do is have a mind to implement those laws and to enforce those laws, and there's nothing we can do about it. We have to get off of our do-nothingness. We who have disabilities, 60 million strong, the largest minority group in the country are people with disabilities. I call them the forgotten majority because there's so many of us, 1 billion people here, and 60 million people there. That's a lot of folk. And everybody's not institutionalized. Everybody is not bedridden. Everybody is not unable to understand certain things. Most of us have abilities that are great abilities that if we want to get together and really formulate plan and strategies, we can do it to make our lives better for every one of us, not just some of us. We got to get off of this. I got cerebral palsy, and so I'm going to deal with my cerebral palsy folk, and you deal with your blind folk, and you deal with your deaf folk. We got to get away from all of that. We are all the same. Society brushes all of us with the same brush. If you're blind, you're disabled. If you're deaf, you're disabled. If you're a little person, you're disabled. If you have cystic fibrosis, you're disabled. If you have cancer where it impacts your life in a significant way, you are disabled. If you have diabetes and have had a leg amputated because of your diabetes, you are disabled. If you have cerebral palsy, you're disabled. If you have polio, you're disabled. Down syndrome, you're disabled. Tourette syndrome, you're disabled. Muscular dystrophy, multiple sclerosis, you're disabled. Lupus, you're disabled. Schizophrenia is a disability. Paranoia is a disability. Some of the conditions that the young children have. What is it, ADS or whatever, ADHS? And some of the other ones, autism is a disability. Sickle cell anemia, AIDS, all disabilities. Not the way society has defined it, not the way Webster Dictionary has defined it, but disability meaning you have some challenges in life. Some things you cannot do or you cannot do easily because of the condition that you have. No, it's not going to be enough for people to survive. Deidre asks, is this lump sum going to be enough for people to survive? To really survive? No, of course not. Because it's going to be up to the discretion of the states. And remember, I'm going to tell you something about this. The federal government got into the play of how they are today because of how the states have done with people who were disenfranchised in the past. States' rights. I remember it in the 50s and 60s. It was about the civil rights movement was blocked and hindered by the states' rights. Governors who were not open-minded. You know, there are governors right now that did not accept Obamacare into their state and other things like that. When you leave it up to the state, it's 50 states, 50 governors, senators that are apart from the United States senators. There are state senators. There are state representatives. And most of the time they come from the environment that the state is in. So if the state is somewhat prejudicial, the state is somewhat biased, we got a lot of folk in there that have this segregationist mindset or this ableist mindset or discriminatory mindset or homophobic mindset, then some of the programs and some of the decisions, even some of the laws that have been made by the federal government will be repealed or not be enforced because the federal government said they're going to take our hands off of some of this stuff and give it back to you. You decide. That's why slavery lasted as long as it did. Because the federal government refused to take action and left it up to each individual state to deal with their black population. The same with Native Americans. The federal government took their hands and said, state, you deal with it. So lump sum versus a block grant. A block grant means that, every dollar you spend, we're going to spend equal amount. Now, lump sum means we're going to give your state, let's say, $5 million. That's a low figure. Let's say $60 million or $1 billion we're going to give toward your, let's say, education program. That's all we're going to give you. Now, your budget for education may be $100 billion. We're going to give you $1 billion. Which means the $90 billion you have to work out for your, or $99 billion you have to work out for yourself. We give you X amount of dollars, work with it. That's different than sharing the wealth, isn't it? That when I spend $1, you spend $1. I spend $10, you spend $10. That's a continuum of support. Lump sum means we're giving you support now. We're going to allocate it, give it to you in January. Whatever you do from January to December, that's up to you. Once again, possibility of corruption is great. Mismanagement of funds will now be great because now it's going into the hands of the state. And each state has its own priority, what it wants to put the money towards. So yes, it won't be enough. And if it is, even if it is enough, because you're putting it in each individual state's hands, it's going to be managed in a different way with all the 50 states. Some may agree with one another, but in terms of the final decision, it's that state's decision to do this or that with the monies. And once that money is spent, you can't go back anymore. That's it. Till next January. A lot of things to be concerned with there, Arts. Yeah, give him a chance. Give the Trump administration a chance. We have no other choice. He's going to be our president. We'll be in the within the next month. He will be our president. We're December. January, he's sworn in. He will be our next president. His nominees, many of them will pass. They're already saying it already. Republicans are pretty much in agreement. They're going to pass most of them, if not all of them. And they will be Secretary of State, Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary of the Treasury, on and on commerce and all the rest. And whatever their political ideas and ideologies are, will be adopted. We have to keep them in mind, all those 435 congresspersons that agree with this, because after all, the president don't make laws. He may send a bill up to Congress, but he doesn't make laws. It's the Congress that makes the laws. Remember that. If you want to blame the president for this and blame the president for that, if there's a failure, remember that one fact, that it's not the president that makes laws. It's the Congress that makes laws. The executive branch, which the president heads, enforces the laws that the Congress, the legislative branch, makes. So don't let it all go under the hands of Trump. Yeah, and your senator helped. And your congressman helped make this thing that the president wanted into law. If it wasn't for the Congress agreeing with it and accepting it and approving it and passing it and confirming it, it would not be. Even some of these persons that are going up for nomination for these cabinet posts. If you really believe their record is contrary to what you want, where they want this country to go, you need to do something. Write your congressperson. Just gave it to you. www.house.com, www.senator.com, .gov. I'm sorry, both of them .gov. www.house.gov, www.senator.gov. Write to them. Tell them, I want you to vote this person down. If you don't vote them down, I'm going to vote down you in 2018. 33 senators are up. Out of the 100 senators, 33 of them are up for re-election in 2018. One of my senators are up. One was chosen this year. One will be chosen in 2018 for my state of Pennsylvania. Find out who they are, who's up for re-election. I already told you it's easy for the congresspersons. All of them going to be up for re-election in 2018. Every congressperson, from Ryan to all the other congresspersons we know about, have been talking this thing up and down and over and around. Find out what they've done in these next 2 years. Find out their voting record in these next 2 years and vote them out. 2016, there was virtually no change in shift in terms of the Republican majority. Nobody was put out. And anybody who was put out, 2 more were brought in, so they're just as powerful now than they were before. Now more powerful because they won the White House. But it's up to us as the citizens of this country to be diligent. Not to shrug up our shoulders and say, okay, we're going to work toward 2020. My God, by the time 2020 comes, this whole nation could be up in smoke. All it takes is one bad decision. And people agreeing with that bad decision to make chaos out of an already difficult situation. Okay, my dear heart, so until next time, we'll be seeing each other again Monday at 3 o'clock. Have a wonderful and blessed weekend. And remember to keep your eyes on the prize. It's up to us to make a difference in the nation that we live in, the United States of America.